Welcome back to the Lucid Fitness Podcast. I'm Erik and this is Sarah, and this is a small mini-series that we're starting that's more casual and laid back than the previous episodes that we were doing. We're going to talk about the psychology of a fit person, and we're going to talk about our trials and tribulations of when we were growing up, when we started going to the gym, when pretty much our entire journey of fitness and nutrition in order to help beginners really understand that this journey is very not only independent to the person, but it's very much a up and down journey, right? It's not a straight linear path from the day we decided to be fit and we just made it here without any issues. And so today on this episode, we're going to talk about our early stages of life, what we did in terms of exercise and maybe our nutrition growing up, to kind of give a glimpse of how we really got from, where we started our childhood, our normal high energy days to, our current situation, teaching you guys. So I know I grew up exercising, through, just general play. And I grew up doing a lot of sports, with recreation or with school. Did you grow up doing a lot of those things?
Yeah, well, I did unconventional sports. So I was an active kid. A lot of times I spent most of my days outside. And then I did a lot of martial arts. So basically from middle school through high school, even a little bit after that, I did multiple different kinds of martial arts. I did horseback riding. I did gymnastics. So I did all of those kind of other very physical activity things, but I didn't play like a specific sport beyond like a soccer camp or something like that.
Right.
But that was like pretty much my very young childhood all the way up until my late teens.
So what was the first thing you did? What was the first thing, maybe not necessarily the first activity you ever did, but the first one that really hit home that you enjoyed the sport or the exercise?
I think gymnastics was probably my first real, I was 7. And so that was like my first introduction into being and practicing being very physically active. And I think I did it like maybe 4 or 5 times a day or 4 or 5 times a week. So I was at the gymnastics studio a number of times over I think 2 years I did that.
That's cool. And from your perspective, if you think back on doing gymnastics, did you probably saw it more as something that was fun than something that was strictly exercise in a sense? Because I know as a child, I really didn't have the mindset as like, I'm doing this so that I'm healthy, right? Like how we do it now, it's like we lift weights and we do things like it may be fun, but I wouldn't say as a child we necessarily had the foresight that the exercise we did early life was going to have an impact on our much, much later life.
Yeah, I don't think that was even like a thought in my mind, like of it being like, this is exercise or this is good for me. It was, I'm good at this and this is fun.
Right.
It was much more, I think, where my 7-year-old brain was.
So did you were you driven to do that by your parents, or was it more of a exploratory thing where you were just trying things out and you latched onto gymnastics for whatever? Like, what was it about gymnastics that drove you to do it?
Everyone in my age group, all of my friends, I was homeschooled, so all of my friends were in public school. And so any place where I could connect with something they were doing is something I wanted to do. And they were at that time doing either dance or gymnastics. And so I picked gymnastics and I wanted to do gymnastics. Now, I was not pushed into any of the things I did with my parents, whether it was gymnastics or swimming or martial arts or anything like that. In fact, it was probably more the opposite. After I had been doing it for a time, usually it would get to the point where the teachers would come to my parents and be like, she's very skilled in this. We need her here every day, if not twice a day, if possible, because she has a career in this. And my parents would go, she's 7.
Yeah.
Let's not. And that's usually when I would probably get bored of something and then I'd want to move on to the next thing. So that was much more of where mine was. I was, oh, I've done this for a couple years now, on to the next.
Yeah.
And for my parents, it was, that's good, on to the next.
Right.
Because they never really saw, I never had anything that was like so passionately inside of me that my parents pushed me to pursue it, at least at a young age, career-wise.
Right. And I think it's, finding passion in one specific thing at that age is kind of an illusion to begin with, right? It's probably, oftentimes it's probably a self-fulfilling prophecy of the adults, trying to live vicariously through the child, like maybe mom did gymnastics or something like that. I know, I'll talk about it later, but a lot of my journey was very much the opposite of that, where I was driven to do sports in a way that, it was in my father's footsteps, because he wanted me to, he enjoyed sports. So he wanted me to find a sport to latch on. So I think that there was a lot more of a undertone of like, choose a sport, you're going to be good at it kind of thing. And it's interesting to hear your side of things being a little bit more flexible, as like whatever you were enjoying at the time. And to some extent, like my mom was very good at letting us explore. I think I did every sport really that a child can do. And so it's interesting to see the different perspectives. And I think that, as a parent, it's important to not really, to let your kids excel at things, but not necessarily, push them into what you want them to do, right?
Yeah, because at that point, doesn't it become sort of I'm doing this for you?
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a place you should put your child in.
Yeah.
That ends up making, specifically like what we're talking about, that makes physical activity after that point something that your brain has a hard time associating with being for me. Right. It's for whoever you choose to latch that onto. It's for social media. It's for my boyfriend. It's for to be popular or to fit in these clothes, instead of this is for me to take care of me.
Right. And I'm kind of torn on the matter, because it is, to me, we've talked about it before, there's catalyst, right? And I think catalysts are important to get people started, right? Mm. Because my catalyst for going to the gym, as silly as it is, it's probably very common, is for girls, right? Mm. And so I think that parents can be a healthy catalyst to exercise. In fact, it's probably the most powerful catalyst, is getting your child active early. I know for me, even though I didn't really latch onto any single sport and continue through high school and into college, it built up a base level of athleticism. I'm sure you saw the same thing, that it really did roll over into our lifting careers, right? It allowed us, a lot of the coordination that requires from, a beginner who may not have an athletic background. There's a lot of coordination, a lot of like learning how to move your body, which I don't think while it didn't get us to where we are now entirely, there is a certain like shortcut aspect of it that started from our childhood.
Well, right? Yeah. And like for me, like I didn't do sports like soccer or football or baseball or things like that. I did martial arts. So with the aspect of doing martial arts, there are things like physically training your body, like squats and deadlifts and push-ups and all of those sort of things to make you kick stronger or make you punch harder or make you be able to hold these different stances for a long period of time. So those movements were not foreign to my body, and I was not in a place where it was difficult. Like I had already been put into a proper squat form. I had already been put into a proper push-up form for years upon years.
Right. And I think that's important, but it's not everything, right? No. Because I would say for my personal journey, I started pretty much as early as you really can, started doing sports from what I remember. Lots of baseball, lots of football. Later in my childhood, a little bit of soccer. Well, actually, a lot of soccer. I did quite a bit of soccer. I never really. I played basketball casually, and I think I was decent at it because I had that underlying um, natural ability, but I didn't really hit my height growth spurt until later in life. So I never really, I think height matters a lot more in basketball than it does in other sports. But I think a lot of that drive was from my dad. And, he played baseball as long as I remember. He played baseball until he passed away when I was 10. And I think that shift, I still continued on for a while after he passed away, where I still played sports. I still played soccer. I played tennis for a while. I kept moving on that path, but when my stepdad entered the picture, I caught the itch for, the technology side of things. So it kind of created this like hybrid path for me where, I was still interested in sports because, it's what I had been doing for so long, but I kind of caught the itch for technology and video games and started deviating away from the sports. And that's why I said earlier that it's important, but not everything, is because I spent a good portion of my later middle school into my high school years really not focused on sports at all. A common question in my 20s was like, what sport do you play? Because I had started lifting, and so I looked like an athletic person, but a lot of them were surprised to hear I didn't play sports in high school, not through the school in any sort of high level. I think in high school I did play some soccer with the recreational leagues, but I remember trying out for football my sophomore or junior year, and the tryouts didn't go very well because I just didn't have the passion for it, right? I didn't really care to practice. I didn't have that same drive that my dad had driven, which I fully expect if he was still in my life, middle school and high school, I would have probably played all through high school, right? And my life would have been totally different. Who knows if I even ended up in a gym in the way I do it, right? Like where I'm lifting more for aesthetics, I may have ended up more on a athletic sports path where I'm training for power, I'm training for athletic performance. But I don't think there's any path where I didn't really go towards fitness in general, just because it was just ingrained so early. That was an important, those early years, and having that drive from my dad was very transformative in a lot of ways. Like now that I'm much older, I can look back in hindsight and see it's like, yeah, I caught that itch for sports early, and then it kind of evolved as I realized I had more passion on the tech side and less on the athletics. And then I kind of went off the deep end where I don't really remember exercising through high school at all. And it wasn't until I started getting back into it in college where I started going to the college gym because it was free and really there was not a whole lot to be doing, right? You go to class, you go to the gym. And I started really getting more comfortable in the gym in my college years, my early 20s too.
Okay. Yeah. I think before we move on to like because we've talked about our childhood, before we move on to like what our early 20s and 20s looked like, I'd like us to talk about like what was like your nutrition growing up? Like what did your household usually eat? Like was your family really conscious about eating well balanced foods and that sort of thing, or were you more like me where it was well balanced, but like cereal and hamburger helper?
Yeah, no, very much so. I think that's an important question. And I think nutrition's evolved a lot since we were kids.
Yeah.
We're not old, but it's evolved a lot.
The 90s was a different time.
Right. And so I think that to give the benefit of the doubt to our parents, they were likely doing what they thought was best in terms of, I think most blooming families start generally like from a place of need, right? And what I mean by that is like, I know for me growing up, I don't recall really having a whole lot of, money to blow on extravagant meals. So like there was a lot of it that was like what they could put on the table, and so I remember eating a whole lot of canned spinach I remember a lot of Hamburger Helper, the occasional the occasional McDonald's meal, I remember Friday being our like going out to eat, but it was pretty much like Happy Meals back then were like $2. So it was a little bit different.
This is way different.
Yeah. And so I don't remember nutrition being ingrained in any way. And I think that it's part of the reason why it took me a really long time to really get up to speed with fitness and nutrition. Like I'm 15 years in. I would say it probably took me a good 7 or 8 years before I even realized what I was eating mattered. And I think a lot of that came from just not necessarily my mother's negligence or my parents' negligence, but just, nutrition hadn't evolved into this hyper-informed nutrition that we have today, where you can Google what's the best meal for my 6-year-old kid to eat.
Yeah.
Versus, back then it's kind of like, okay, well, this has protein, this is carbs. We put it into a meal. We got Hamburger Helper, throw in a vegetable. Like, I don't really recall, I'm sure I had fruits, but I don't have any memories of eating fruits. I have memories of choking down vegetables. I still hate vegetables, but,
you hate them so much.
And there's a certain element of, I could have likely, had a nutritionist mother who gave me a much better diet, but I feel like it's hard to look back on my life and say something was wrong, right? Because I got here. I eventually developed enough understanding of nutrition to, make my life healthier through eating healthier meals and stuff. But what was it? You said you primarily ate like hamburger, or not primarily, but you remember eating Hamburger Helper.
Yeah, I remember those things too, but my mom worked in the medical field. And so my mom also struggled herself with some eating disorder. So she would always do her best to tell us, eat when you're hungry, stop when you're full, make sure that you're getting protein in, like that. I remember having those kind of conversations even when I was like little. Maybe even like 7, 8, 9, 10. Like I remember having these conversations. And of course, I was a homeschool kid too. And I there was 4 kids and my parents, just trying to make it. And so of course we had Hamburger Helper and mac and cheese and we went out to eat at McDonald's and that sort of thing. I remember those, but I do specifically remember having those kind of conversations where we ate bananas and apples and there were strawberries. There was always fresh fruit in the house. There was always fresh vegetables in the house because my dad grew up with his parents being the same age as my mom's grandparents. So my dad's parents met in World War II. So they were of a generation where my dad only saw vegetables unless they came out of can. It was canned green beans, canned spinach. And so my dad made it was like a house rule. We have vegetables, but never once they came out of a can. Never ever once. Because he couldn't even fathom that should ever live in the pantry. Yeah. So we always had, fresh fruits and fresh vegetables and that sort of thing. And I think my parents had a really good balance in what they fed to us. And my mom, I just remember her kind of ingraining into me, it's okay to leave food on your plate. If you're full, listen to your body, listen to your hunger cues. There was never any shaming around food.
Right.
There wasn't any, because I had friends who, dinner was saved until the next day because they didn't eat everything on their plate. But because of where my mom came from and how she was raised, there was never any food stigmas. It was, oh, you're done, you're full, you ate, you tried everything on your plate, you may go. We're not going to punish you and make you eat too much or punish you and not let you eat something else.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's very much different than my experience. So it's interesting that we've kind of gravitated towards, very similar lifestyle. I mean, it helps that, we're very compatible people. Yeah. But from my remembrance, I don't really remember being shamed, but I remember vividly finish your plate, like, and to me, that was probably one of the only real strong memories I have from early childhood eating was you eat everything on your plate before you get down, right? And so I think that that's likely I still very much live that way where I almost always try to eat everything that's on my plate, but as an adult, you have a lot more flexibility. You can choose, and especially once you work your way out of poverty, and it's less, do or die.
You
It's a
don't
situation.
waste food.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's like when you're living in a life of abundance, and your needs are taken care of. Like, you don't really have to worry about the 25 calories you left on your plate, right? I'm not starving. Clearly, I'm not starving. You're not starving, and so I think that is, whether we like it or not, like a big driving factor of how we look at food coming from our childhood, just like the same way, like our childhood's determining, how we look at fitness as well. And I think that's why it's so important for parents to ingrain these things in their child, at least up to their understanding,
Yeah.
is because these things clearly stick with us, right? Like I would, let's say for whatever reason, I never grew up with sports. Like I likely would have just, been a tech guy, right? I ended up being a tech guy anyways because you can be multiple things in your life. But, I likely wouldn't have had the same foundation and understanding and the coordination and the athleticism required to get into a more, traditional fitness and nutrition lifestyle.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to reflect on it because now in hindsight I can clearly see like these things formed. It's something as small as telling your child finish the food on his plate completely changes their relationship with food for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And I would say up until recently I had a relationship with food that was, I wouldn't say unhealthy. It's probably more average, but I ate a lot of fast food. I was chasing things that were just edible because maybe I had this psychological thought in my head is like, I need to eat things that are hyper palatable because I have to finish my meals. And it wasn't until I really started like evaluating the food that I was putting into my mouth and how it's more of a fuel than it is something to be purely enjoyed. Yeah, I really started changing my relationship with food, and I think that was a massive part of my journey because everything started compounding much more rapid at that rate. Like once you start fueling your body right, it's like, oh, okay, well now I have more willpower, I have more energy in the day, I have more decision making capacity, I'm more likely to get up and get out and do things, and you're strengthening your positive feedback loops by reevaluating your relationship with food. But do you think, outside of fitness and nutrition, what other variables in your childhood do you think drove you to end up, finally going to the gym and like leading up to not necessarily getting in the gym the first day, but maybe like what kind of got you onto looking at fitness and nutrition as an actual thing as opposed to just doing sports for fun? Like, where was that turning point where you started evaluating, okay, I'm doing sports not just because it's fun to do, but because it's like, it's nice to push my body, it's nice to exercise, and, seeing the benefits of it beyond just being fun.
Early on, I think part of it was from my mother's encouraging, was I latched onto pretty quickly that being physically active was a good way to relieve stress. So, and I kind of figured that I think more out in like my 15, 16, 17 years. But I did kind of latch in through martial arts, like that I felt better when I moved my body, and my hormonal stress was better when I moved my body. At that point, the few relationships I had been in were not super great, and I would always gravitate towards, you know what, I'm going to take up running, or I'm going to take up trying to do an at-home workout every day, because I just almost naturally was like, I'm feeling really stressed. Oh, I need to do something. Okay, I'm going to move my body. Like, it was just always kind of like a natural flow for me to think that way. And I think that was set up when I was younger, that when we got hyperactive, or when my mom was frustrated with something, or when my mom was having a lot of stress in her life, we all went and did something physically active. And so it just kind of became muscle memory to me. And through even my 20s, that was an aspect. Like, I knew that things were getting bad when I would go from being not active at all to I need to go do something. Then it was almost like an afterthought cue after that of something's not right because it wasn't out of a place of habit at that point working out. It was at a place of, I'm under so much stress, I'm trying to self-soothe, and I would use exercise as my self-soothing.
Yeah, that's interesting for sure. That's very much different than my perspective, early childhood. I find it interesting to see that you very early were learning the benefits of it. And maybe that's an important part of being able to start and keep going later in adulthood, is that element of you learn what it was like to exercise in terms of what benefits it was giving you. Like, it was making you very directly, it was a very clear correlation that when I exercise and I'm physically active, I feel better on a daily basis. And so I would say for me, it was very much a different experience. And, maybe it was because I was, driven to do these sports, but I don't really remember them. I'm sure there was, to some extent, I was feeling better, but for me, they were very much a source of frustration. I think those were some of the early days where I really started recognizing I had a temper. I remember one time, like, playing football, like I missed a play or something like that, and I remember like tearing off my helmet, like just angry, right? And maybe that's why I took so much time away from it for a while, because I had to relearn sports and fitness through a new lens that wasn't a point of frustration to me, right? And I mean, granted, competitive aspect aside, I do think that there was this certain push for me to do sports, and while I enjoyed doing them, maybe I wasn't enjoying them for the right reasons, and so I don't think I ever found that healthy aspect of sports, at least not that I can recall, where not until much later in life did I discover the benefits of going and actually doing it in terms of it being healthy and it making me feel good. Obviously, anyone who exercises and takes fitness and nutrition seriously is going to eventually feel good.
Yeah.
Right. That's one of the greatest benefits, is it improves your body. It makes you feel better.
Yeah.
And it gives you more control over your body and all of those aspects. While I picked up on the coordination aspects and, the athleticism of it, I don't think I had the same psychological realization that you did as a child, where like, this is something I was doing to relieve stress. And so it's interesting to hear from your point of view, that you were using it as a tool to de-stress, like even early in your life.
So was there any time where, like you said, you kind of took a break in high school? Like, how long for you did that break last?
A while. I think that it was, I can't remember how long I played soccer, but somewhere around my sophomore year of high school, the passion for sports just wasn't there. Whether that was due to having other things to do with video games and, the internet starting to come around. Things were starting to change very rapidly then. And again, like with the shift in, father figure from my dad to my stepdad didn't have the same, passion for doing sports himself, right? He watched sports, but it wasn't like I was being compelled to do it as hard as I was. Like my mom still, she wanted me to be active, and she understood that us being active through our school years was important, but there wasn't that same underlying, you're going to do this kind of thing. Yeah. And so I just, I shifted my hobbies and I changed. I started playing Dungeons and Dragons. I started playing video games. I still hung out with my friends a lot. And I would say I was active in the sense that I was like riding my bike regularly, and I'd play driveway hockey. We had a friend's driveway who was like super long, so it was like a perfect hockey field and things like that. But my formal constructive sports, it was, I don't even really remember it being a thought in high school in terms of like something I was truly compelled to do. I maybe was doing tennis at that point, but even that, I remember, I don't remember the conversation, but I remember talking with my mom and just straight up like, I'm not really interested in this anymore. And her recognizing that and, allowing me to shift away from that. But I think that it was probably a good several years before I regained that passion. And it was again in college. So most of high school and then early in college, I started like thinking about it a lot more, because I think I started thinking about women a lot more too. And so that's when I was like, okay, well, I want to be stronger. I want to be better looking. And so I started going to the gym there in college, started going to the college gym. And that was the first time I really remember like thinking about progress in terms of wanting to lift more weights. Because I had early in life in high school, probably my freshman or sophomore year, I had a gym class. And that was the first time I did actual lifting, right? Like squatting and pressing and things like that. But I think it was one of the first times I actually realized an injury as well was squatting in gym class and hurting my back for the first time, right? And so that carried with me until now. I still have a bad back. And so I remember like episodes of fitness in all of my life, but there was no continuum. There was no like, I started football, I liked baseball, then I tried soccer, then I played in high school, then I played in college. Like there was no continuum for me, but it was something that was in my life at certain periods of time, right? Okay. But yours sounds more like maybe not necessarily a strict continuum, but definitely more of a linear path. Was there any time in your life where you didn't really take fitness seriously?
Absolutely. So basically my whole life up until like 1920, I was very active.
1920?
I was still doing horseback riding and martial arts and all of those things. And then right at 19 and 20, it went from that to zero. And it was zero for 11 years, where I didn't go to a gym. I didn't really work out. I wasn't physically active except for short periods where it was that same situation where things were so stressful that and at that point, that's when I was having the kids. So I was pregnant and had a new baby basically for 7 of those 11 years back to back. And it would be so stressful that I would take up running with the stroller, or I would do at-home workouts, but it was never out of like you were like trying to progress, or I was trying to do anything. It was I'm so miserable, I have to do something for myself because I was under so much stress and having such a hard time that I couldn't do anything else. And even with that, I wasn't allowed to go to the gym. I wasn't allowed to leave the house. I wasn't allowed to leave the kids. So I was trying to do things where I was within the restraints that I had.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I moved back home with the kids is when I really latched on to, I was in the gym I started working in a gym, and I was in the gym every single day.
Right.
That's when it wasn't really until 31, 32 that I really was like, I like this now. It was not a self-soothing operation. It was a hobby at that point.
Yeah. And I think there's probably, if I'm reading it right, there's probably some sort of callback to the younger years. Like you've just reached this point of this, again, catalyst for lack of a better term. Like you reach this catalyst of feeling so bad that you're like, okay, well, what can I do to improve this, right? And
Yeah.
I think that instead of like slowly decaying more and more into this like sedentary lifestyle, letting it consume you and becoming, lazy and becoming low energy and depressed and things like that, you latched onto this idea. Maybe it was a fleeting idea, but something from your early childhood implanted this thought into you that, oh, okay, well, I have this other option, right? I have this option where I can take back control over my fitness and nutrition.
Yeah.
And
I
that
think it was definitely an element of, I can't control any of this, but I can control this.
yeah.
This I can do something about.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally have never been a slow down person. When I'm more of a ramp up person. When things get bad, I almost become just like, I have to do something.
Mm-hmm.
I have to do something. And that's what I would gravitate towards.
Yeah, and that really shows the power of it, right? It's the liberating effect of taking control over your life, right?
Yeah.
Even it doesn't matter how long. It's a principle with meditation as well. It's like you can, no matter how long you're away, you can always return to breath. You can always choose to breathe intentionally, deep in and deep out, and you can always choose to, sit and reconstruct your world,
Yeah.
right? That's always something, and it's lost. I feel like it's lost on a lot of people nowadays, is like, because there's so many external control valves. Like you have, all of the online stuff, you have adverts everywhere, you have all of these different variables impacting you from the external. It feels oftentimes like we are out of control, like we are out of control, and it's the exact opposite, right? You relinquish control to these things. You choose to consume. You choose to identify with other people's thoughts, other people's ideas, instead of choosing to build your own life and choosing to take control of your own health and taking control of your own nutrition. Instead of waiting for the government to tell you, eat this, eat that, you choose to learn, like, okay, these foods work well with me. These foods hurt my stomach. Like, take control over your life.
Yeah.
It's one of the most liberating things you can do, because it becomes second nature, and it improves your life, right? It makes you feel healthier. It makes you feel more capable and more powerful. There's a benefit to becoming a powerful person. And it's a disadvantage for these external control things. There's a disadvantage if you do become it, because you stop giving them your control, you stop giving them your money, you stop letting them consume your psyche. And the first step of that is rediscovering the things that you can control the most, which is your health, within reason. Obviously there's some RNG, there's some randomness to whether you get cancer or whether you get an illness or stuff, but you can directly impact the likelihood of that happening by eating more fruits and vegetables,
eating right and exercising.
Right. And you take control over that. You take control over this literal strength of your body. How resilient it becomes by building it up from scratch. You take control of your mental, which is a lot easier once you have your body and your health in your body, that being the first step of building up your mental. because it's really hard to, if your body's falling apart, it's really hard to be happy. Like it's why sick people, they tend to, develop depression. People with chronic illnesses, they tend to, spiral into depression and loneliness because they honestly, they become people no one wants to be around because they're so caught up in their body falling apart that they stop becoming, they're still human, but they stop becoming like relatable people, right? Because if you think about it from, you tend to want to interact with people who are relatable, and you tend to want to be around people who, at least share a similar vibe to you. It's why friendships exist, is those friends that you end up with are like you in a lot of ways, and they're relatable. They have different personalities and different lives, but they like similar things to you. And so once you get sick and once you get injured, if you let that consume you, it destroys your mental, and like healthy people are going to have a harder and harder time relating with you because I know I've had a few friends who've gotten sick and their personalities changed to this woe is me personality where it's exhausting to be around. And so it's like this self-fulfilling thing where if you can take control over your fitness and your nutrition, you can take control of your health. And if you take control over your health, you can start taking control of your mind because your body's supporting your efforts to build a positive, mindset. Not to mention you literally feel better,
Yeah.
And so it's why we preach fitness and nutrition as a core building block to life in general.
The whole
mental,
overall balance.
Yeah, because you can't meditate your way out of cancer, right? But if you fight cancer, and you really push yourself and you really, try to work on your inner world, there's a direct correlation to that mental health and keeping your spirits high to your success at beating cancer, for example.
Yeah.
And so it's like this self-feeding loop. Like a strong body builds into a strong mind, which builds into a stronger body.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to get you to do, is like start that journey.
Yeah, you become your own. Everyone talks about growth and self, growing yourself and that sort of thing. But you really are also the fertilizer to that growth. Like one feeds into the other that creates that growth that I think a lot of us are desperate for, but it also feels really overwhelming. Like that's a daunting thing to that first kind of step into the gym. Like I remember like I had like these 4 little kids and they were little at that point. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do? Like one, I don't look good. I don't even want to wear gym clothes. Like I don't even want to be here.
Right.
Now I gotta figure out what to do with these things. Like what am I supposed to do?
Right.
And I remember just having to take a deep breath and like focus in and be like, just don't look at anybody. Don't think about anybody else. Just get on the stairs for 30 minutes and then leave. Like I remember those first couple of weeks where it was just like, nobody talked to me. Nobody say anything to me. Like I just want to get in and get out because I was so self-conscious and I was so wrapped up in how physically hard. Like every step of it was physically hard. Putting the kids' shoes on, getting in the car, driving there, getting out of the car, walking through the parking lot. I remember it feeling like it was not like a 3% hard. It was like a 75% hard. And it just because we were going to the gym.
Right. And that's definitely in the following episodes, I want to start talking about moving towards that first gym experience and onward. So this episode, I really liked how we talked about our early life and how it impacts it. And I want to kind of walk the audience, you guys, through the journey of where we came from. And then next episode, I want to talk about the pre-gym, like when I know for me, I was working out at home, right? And I was starting to develop these like mental thoughts, and I had developed the catalyst and, chasing women, to get me started at that, and then lead that into what you're talking about, that first time in the gym, because I think that it's important for you guys to understand that even people who have been doing this a long time, they had that same journey, right? It was that for everyone, it's at different ages. For me, it was on and off until I really picked up, in my early 20s, hers early 30s, right? But we're still gravitating towards this same like consciousness. It's this consciousness of, building self, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's also important, and I challenge you guys to reflect on your early life and really look at, maybe you start recognizing that your parents didn't have the appropriate, fitness mindset or nutrition mindset and didn't ingrain the right things into you, that awareness allows you to identify what you can improve, right? And so if I look back on my childhood and it's like my parents dissuaded, they did not want me to do sports. They did not want me to eat right. We ate like crap every day. I was overweight when I was a child, things like that. If you can identify them, you can fix them. Yeah. But you have to be real with yourself. It's like, just like I try to look at, I enjoyed sports, but a lot of the push to do sports was external, right? Yeah. And so recognizing what was you and what was not you, and being able to recognize and, dissolve the bad habits that we picked up along the way. Like for me, dissolving this mentality that I have to eat everything on my plate every time I sit down, dissolving these bad habits so that you can reform with the new proper habits.
Absolutely.
And so reflecting kind of like what we did here, like I feel like this is the first time I've said out loud, like actually what my fitness and nutrition early life was. It was kind of interesting to hear me even say it out loud, because these were just thoughts until I said it. But yeah, like now that I've said it, I've kind of recognized where some of my shortcomings on my journey came from. And I even when I was younger, I started fitness and nutrition, I reflected on my early life, but I don't think I didn't understand the implication of how it was going to impact my journey. Like I understood we ate how we needed to eat financially up until a certain point. And for the most part, my mother chose to, or at least tried to, create balanced meals for us. But if I could go back as I am now and be my own parent in a way, like I would have made more conscious effort to teach about, macronutrients and micronutrients like we do with your kids, is like helping them understand that what they put in their mouth is more important than just, flavor or just fuel or one way or the other. It's like a combination of like building blocks for your overall health and overall, honestly, for performance and appearance and things like that. Like I can't help but think if I had quit drinking milk earlier in my life, if I wouldn't have done as much damage to my skin, that's something I think about all the time. And that was, I would say my penchant for drinking milk came from my childhood, right? But if I had learned early that dairy was often correlated with acne, I would have been able to make connections a lot quicker and do less damage to my skin when I was going through my 20s drinking a gallon of milk a day, right? Like it would have completely changed my trajectory. But also, trying to take the bigger picture into view is like, could I have gotten to where I am now without that part of the journey, right? And I think about that as well. It's like, did the bad skin force me to start looking at nutrition in a new way? And so maybe like if you kind of reflect on all of these aspects leading into starting your fitness journey and like the continuation of your fitness journey, like that's why we at Lucid Fitness, we preach the reflection aspect of it. Like you need to reflect in order to grow, and you need to be able to look at where you came from, because as we've kind of described here, it impacts the decision to your decisions to start. It impacts your decisions on your journey. And all of it's a necessary step, right? We can't just ignore and throw out our childhood, because it's important that we think about it, right? And be honest with ourselves that our childhood negatively or positively impacted it. And I think for a lot of people, it probably negatively impacted it. And it's why we see like a growing obesity problem, and we see a growing health problem.
Absolutely.
Is because these issues that were stemming from a period of uninformed consumption, right? And so we're just now discovering. And in a lot of ways, I wouldn't say it's too late, because you can always start your journey, but a lot of the damage has been done, because it's an idea you and I have talked about a lot, is generational health.
Yeah.
Is your parents taught you based on what they learned from their parents and their parents' habits. And so it's this cascading, uninformed perspective of fitness and nutrition, right?
Yeah.
And now we're starting to understand a lot more. And so it's imperative that we learn these things for ourselves, so that we can ingrain proper habits into the next generation and pass along a trajectory that is growing towards health as opposed to away from it, which we're currently in, right? We're kind of,
as a nation,
we're like reaping this like negative consequence that started, many years ago. And so we have to stop it, recognize that it's happening, and then start working on ourselves so that we know enough for our children to teach them the right ways and to lead by example, right?
Yeah, lead by example, and also understand that it's hard to look at, because there's a shame element to it, even though it's not your fault, right? When you're a kid, the food is being handed to you. You don't have a decision on it, and you're being fed. But either way, when you get older and you start reflecting on some of those negative feelings, I know, like, for my mom, like I was telling you, food and eating food was used as a shaming and a punishment. It was, I'm going to take you and your friends to lunch, and then I'm going to sit here and tell your friends and the waitress that Sally's only having a cup of coffee because she's put on a little too much weight now. And that crippled my mother to the point where she would binge every time she was alone, because it was, well, I'm going to take control in this way. And that shames her so much now that, yes, she did the right thing in raising me and my siblings in a, don't do this. Like this can be hurtful to you. This can hurt your body. But I watched her deal with that my whole life. Mm-hmm. And I know that reflecting back on things that are kind of traumatizing, or that you felt out of control and now you're stuck in this situation and it wasn't your fault, but you still feel like, well, I have to fix this thing that I didn't do.
Yeah.
Right? Those are hard feelings to deal with, but they can be dealt with in a positive way. You can make the decision to go, I'm going to choose to take control in a positive way instead of taking control in a negative way. And that snowball, though it starts out small, rolls way faster than a negative one. And it rolls in a much better way. And you are going to be able to feel better. And whether or not you have children or not, the people you are going to impact around you in that mental change is going to show. People are going to come up to you. They're you sound better. You look like you feel better. You are a pleasure to be around. You always bring the best thing to potluck. Like those decisions, that's what's going to start impacting the people that you care about most.
Right. It's trailblazing, right? Yeah. We trailblazed for you guys so you can trailblaze for the people you care about. Yeah. Even before we started Lucid Fitness, I would say I had an impact on people. Both of my younger brothers, they take fitness and nutrition seriously. I have friends who some of my oldest friends, we've been in a very collaborative sometimes he's ahead on his journey, sometimes I'm ahead. And it's this idea of doing it, and you show your world, you show the people in your life that it's possible, and whether they like it or not, it's influencing their decisions, right? And obviously you can't turn everybody, right? There's some people who are so far consumed that, without professional intervention, it's going to be very difficult to get into them. But there is a certain element of like planting the seed. And I always say that and I remember this is a conversation with my buddy Ben, the one where I was explaining we're in a collaborative lifting. And I was explaining to him that I wanted to help people and I wanted to influence the people in my life to make better health and fitness and wellness decisions. And he said something along the lines of, it's not your responsibility to do that. And I remember thinking about that and us having the conversation. And I was like, yeah, it's not my responsibility. But if I can even plant the seed that one day, 20 years from now, so-and-so might start exercising or so-and-so might start taking his health into consideration, that seed can often blossom into a much bigger thing just by planting that seed, because I showed that you can take control of your life and change your outcome, and you can change your trajectory in a positive way. So if you plant enough of those seeds, then there'll be a non-zero amount of people who are impacted by it. Yeah. And that's where shifting the global momentum, I guess, shifting the global momentum, it's a group project, right? There's no single person, there's no single company, there's no single idea that's going to take us from 70% of adults being overweight back to health. Right? There's no magic to that beyond recognizing what is happening and what has happened in our lives and on the more global scale, understanding what's happening, and then choosing directly and intentionally to fix it. Yeah. Starting with yourself. And because nobody's going to look at a health minister who's obese himself telling us what we should and should not eat. Just like nobody in your life is going to take you seriously about eating healthy until you prove it. Like that's just the reality. And that's what's beautiful about fitness and nutrition is like the proof is in your physical look, like the way you appear, right? It tells your whole story.
Yeah, and the way you show up.
Right.
In the way you look, in the way you show up, in the way you are able to interact, all of those things are impacted.
Mm. Yeah, and that builds credibility, right? It's like we're not the most shredded people in the world. Like that's not our goal. Our goal is much bigger than that, is to transform health and fitness and wellness into a manageable package for people who are coming from a early life that isn't as clear as ours, that isn't as like clearly positively impacted by fitness in the beginning. But again, in our reoccurring theme is that we can't give you all of the pieces to your puzzle. We can show you how our pieces fit into our puzzle and help you reflect on how yours fit into yours, but finding that catalyst, whether it be, proving your parents wrong or proving your parents right or making a name for yourself, regardless of how you were raised, learning and reflecting and building that and finding your catalyst and finding your new worldview, I think. And that's what we're trying to help you do. In this series and leading into next episode, we're going to continue to talk about our journey in our different, not even milestones, but our different turning points in our lives. Like next episode, as I discussed earlier, I want to talk about leading up to the gym, when we really started looking at fitness and nutrition in a way that we started seeing this as like, okay, I need to get to a gym to reach the next level up so that we can show you how how this works, right? Like how the journey works.
Absolutely.
In a very candid way. We're just trying to tell you our journey so that you can see that this journey is very much something that is dynamic and very individual, right? But it all is when you're 20 years down the road and you're at, our level in terms of understanding of fitness and nutrition to you, you can look back and see like all of the same milestones in your life and turning points in your life.